have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So a deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours. I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. Welcome.
And before I go up, I'm going to run out of time here. I got plenty to continue. On and on and on. I hope you picked up a list of very important things today. They're giving us the tools we need to respond.
We have a little crosstalk going on there. Sorry about that, folks. I sure hope that we are connected and that we're live and good. We'll find out momentarily whether all is okay, but I certainly hope so. Any rate, welcome once again to Character Matters. I'm Dr. George Simon. This is where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that plagues much of the free world, including our own country, undermining our country's greatness. Like never before, we really need to restore the greatness of America. This is the last best hope of freedom on earth. And if you doubt that, just turn your thoughts for a moment to the rogue state of North Korea and its shenanigans with regard to the two Americans who were convicted of the capital sin, the capital crime of proselytizing by leaving behind a Bible in a bar in that godless country. I'm not here to evangelize nor to defend evangelization. That's not what I'm here for. But I do want to call your attention to these repressive societies that deny people free expression of their beliefs, including those societies that would literally these days once again crucify you for your belief or behead you. Or do the same if you should choose to renounce a particular belief, a belief handed down to you by your parents that you never had the right to really choose for yourself, and that you reject. There are repressive countries on this earth where that happens. And we are fortunate to live in a country where we have the freedom to express ourselves and the freedom to hold our own beliefs. And those freedoms really are to be cherished. We have a holiday coming up here next week, Veterans Day, commemorating all those who put their lives on the line, who sacrificed, made the ultimate sacrifice to keep us free. The price of freedom is not free. The price of freedom is high. It always has been high. And freedom never experiences more danger, more threat to its existence from within than when people renege on their core values and principles, or their professed core values and principles, or the values and principles that made us great. I think there are some folks among us, unfortunately, they have values. They're just not the values that we want them to have. They do have principles. They're just not the principles that we'd like them to have. They hold those principles with conviction, and they act on them, and the chaos that we have sometimes is the result. But freedom depends on character. The framers knew that. They knew that when they were fashioning a constitutional government, that it would never even work. John Adams said that very thing. He said the Constitution could never be fashioned for anything but a moral and religious people. That it was a danger, actually, to fashion such a country under such democratic principles if there weren't people of upstanding character in it. And I'm afraid that in our modern culture of narcissism, of entitlement, of permissiveness, of moral relativism, I'm afraid in that culture we've experienced an unprecedented degree of character decline in the last several years, and this has cost us dearly, jeopardizing our freedoms greatly and inviting government to hand down repressive rules and sanctions that only God-fearing, law-abiding people respect and adhere to. Those among us who don't care to abide by the rules don't pay any attention to the rules we write or the laws we pass anyway. So these actions by government only serve to restrain the freedoms of others and put an additional burden on those already carrying the heavy weight of the burden that it is these days to function responsibly in our society. And this jeopardizes our freedom greatly. It jeopardizes us all. So my mission has been for many years to restore the character of America by helping restore the character of its people, one heart at a time. Toward that end, you heard at the beginning of this program, and you will hear again at the close, an anthem that my wife and I wrote in 1999 at the turn of the new millennium, in anticipation of the new millennium. And as a matter of fact, we called it Anthem for the Millennium, but it came to be known by its subtitle, America, My Home. And it's a personal message about honoring our country's best ideals and preserving the legacy of freedom for ourselves and for our children and our children's children. And we do that by embracing our best ideals and living out in full character those ideals to the best we can. To be upstanding people, people of responsibility, people who take pride in individual accomplishment and achievement, people who take a sincere and empathic approach to those who are truly disadvantaged, those among us who are truly disabled in some way and cannot, not will not, but cannot fend for themselves, and affording them basic human dignity. We do that as people of character. And when we do that, we enable freedom to prosper, the freedom to be all that we can be, the freedom to innovate, the freedom to pursue wealth, happiness, prosperity, and to build a better life for ourselves and for our children and for our children's children. That's what it's all about. And that's what my work has been about. My 3 books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, is about those nefarious characters you encounter every day at home and at work, who would manipulate and try to control you. Understanding them, what makes them tick, how they operate, what tactics they use, how to confront those tactics, how to empower yourselves in relationships with character-disturbed people. And then my second book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, about all of the disturbed characters out there, the various aggressive personalities, the narcissistic characters, all of the folks who will make your life miserable. They're happy as clams. They don't think they have a problem. They think you have a problem. But you know there's something wrong with them because it's all about them. They don't care about who they hurt. They exploit. They demean. They use and abuse. So character disturbance is about those kinds of folks, how to empower yourselves in dealing with them, how to empower yourself, and also how to get the right kind of help, not just for yourself, but for people like that. Because traditional therapy was never meant to deal with these kinds of problems. We live in a very, very different age. A very different age with different kinds of problems. In addition to my 2 books on character, there's the Judas Syndrome, targeted to the Christian faith community, about how a sincere and genuine faith can truly transform our lives and elevate us to a higher plane of functioning. So all 3 books are available online as digital downloads, Amazon, Kindle, your bookstore, BarnesandNoble.com, audiobooks. You can go to Audible.com and get all 3 of the books. All of these are to help folks understand the phenomenon of our age and to deal with it effectively, thus empowering themselves. And in addition to my books, I write for 2 blogs. My own blog at manipulative-people.com. That's manipulative-people.com. And counselingresource.com. That's counseling with 2 L's, resource.com. I have 1 article a week on each of these blogs. And on my own blog at manipulative-people.com, I'm currently running a series of articles on popular terms and principles and concepts that came out of psychology. Not all of these are psychology terms, but these are terms that have come into the common parlance that are frequently misunderstood or misused or mislabeled. And I'm a stickler for these kinds of things because one thing we've learned in the last 20 years or so that we know well with respect to helping people change for the better, and we know that how we see things, what our perceptions are, the beliefs and attitudes that we hold, how we look at things really matters. As a matter of fact, it matters so much that it greatly influences how we conduct ourselves. There's an inextricable connection between the way we think about things and the way we act. This is what we've learned. There's just mounds and mounds and mounds of science about this. And because of that, what I found in my experience as a helping professional over the years is that many times situations either didn't get better or got worse because folks didn't really perceive the situation correctly. Or perhaps they misperceived it altogether. That's one of the things that I realized just before I began my clinical research for my first book, In Sheep's Clothing. What I realized is that people got manipulated because they really didn't realize what their manipulator was up to. They had all kinds of opinions about what was going on that were inaccurate. Their gut would tell them one thing. Their gut would tell them, this person is trying to take advantage of me. This person is throwing me on the defensive, so they must be on the attack in some way. But I can't see it. When they offer their rationalizations, when they minimize, when they offer their denials, they have me wondering if I'm not all messed up. So I don't see what it is they're doing accurately, and I mistrust my gut judgment. And that's precisely how I get taken in. So one of the things that's happened over the years, and I couldn't be happier about it, is I get emails each and every day, hundreds of emails a year from folks who say that just getting a different point of view on the character-impaired person in their lives, just coming to see this person in a different light, learning to trust their gut, having somebody else validate their gut feeling, and seeing these wolves in sheep's clothing for the characters that they really are, and not just excuse them as unintentional bad deed doers of some kind, but intentional controllers, intentional manipulators, intentional exploiters, and then realizing how they do it. Coming to see that changed everything for folks, changed their whole lives. And nothing could be more edifying for me as an author and as a helping professional. Nothing has been more edifying than having that happen hundreds of times over. So I have a series of articles this week that is all about the terms and concepts that we frequently hear yet misuse and misunderstand. And this past week's post has been a very interesting one. It's been on shame, guilt, regret, remorse, and contrition. I have written about these topics before, but I wanted to go into them in more depth in this current series of posts on my blog, and to do a little bit more explaining about these terms, because they are so often confused. And I want to spend a lot more time on shame than anything else, because this is a much maligned concept, a very much maligned concept, especially in the mental health field. And I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. But I want you to understand that these terms have meaning, as all terms do, and it's important to get it right. It's really important to get it right. Let's start with regret. Regret is an absolutely amoral response to an adverse or unpleasant circumstance. You can have regret over a lot of things. You can have regret that while you were in the supermarket and you saw someone else approaching the fast checkout line and you were approaching too, you could have regret that you didn't step it up just a little bit more to be able to inch 2 inches ahead of the person who was heading there also, and now you're second in line. And then that person, although they have only 2 items, has an item that's unmarked and needs a price check, and all of a sudden you're there you're there in line. You've got something waiting at home, and where you thought you might be 2 minutes, it's going to be another 5 or 10 before you get through the line. And then you look around, and there are 3 or 4 more lines, and they're all busy. And if you pull out of that line and go to another one, you're in just as deep doo-doo. So you stay right there, and you just grin and bear it. Now, you can have regret over something like that. Regret has to do with the fact that you lament. It actually comes from the French word meaning complain or lament. It's your complaint that something didn't go quite as you would like it to go. Or maybe something happened that you're not happy about. Maybe a friend has an unfortunate circumstance befall them. Maybe there's a wedding that you're not going to be able to attend. Maybe there are 2 equally attractive concerts in the area, and you can only go to one. And you purchase your tickets, happy that you're going to one, but with some regret that you can't attend the other. It's not a moral feeling. It's not based on any moral issue. And it has nothing to do with grieving or having sorrow over a moral issue or a failing. It's simply a purely amoral lament over not being able to do something or having some unpleasant circumstance come around, some unfortunate circumstance, some undesirable circumstance. And that's it. Now, I can't tell you how many times folks with really serious character disturbances have had regret for certain things, and how many times folks have misinterpreted that regret for something else, especially remorse. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Regret is not remorse. There's a big, big difference. But I can't tell you the number of times that somebody's misinterpreted that. Oh, by the way, if you want to join the conversation, or if you have an example, or you have a question for me about any of these things, or any other topic, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll be happy to take your call. So regret is a purely amoral lament about something unpleasant. It has nothing to do with the moral issue, and it has no kinship to remorse at all. Even the most hardened criminals, even the most recalcitrant antisocial personalities that you can think of, can have regrets. They might regret that they overslept and didn't take the prime opportunity that they would have otherwise had to case the particular bank that they are planning on robbing, and they have to wait till the same time next week because that's the best and most opportune time to case the place. They might have regret that a person might have regret that they didn't misrepresent slickly enough this used car that they were trying to sell you. Perhaps they undersold it just a bit. They had you on the ropes, but they let you go because they didn't go for the jugular, or they didn't find just that weakness that would have made you sign on the dotted line for this old clunker that they almost had you believing was the car of your dreams for just pennies a day And so they might have regret that they let you go. They might have regret that they didn't line their pockets with another $200 or $300 in commission by selling you this junker. So there are all kinds of folks that can have regret who are not very good characters. Regret won't get you much in the way of building good character. And it shouldn't be misinterpreted when we see it in other people, especially people with character disturbances. Remorse is a little bit different. Remorse is anguish over something that you've done that has created a bad circumstance or caused injury to somebody. It actually comes from an odd derivative. It comes from the Latin word meaning to bite again with more force. And it refers to that kind of gnashing the teeth feeling or that jaw clenching feeling that you have when you know you've done something wrong and you know that there's going to be a price to be paid for it with respect to your integrity and to the health of your relationships. It's very different from regret. It's not just that you regret the event happening. You feel badly inside. You have anguish inside. You have this gnawing feeling because your conscience is bothering you. You're having some guilt. It arises out of guilt about something you've done that's hurt somebody or created a problem in some way. That's remorse. Now, folks with disturbed characters, and I write about this quite a bit, I have a series on the blog called Neurosis versus Character Disturbance, and then I outline all the various criteria, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the various criteria on which folks who are, for lack of a better term, mostly neurotic. That means they have a conscience and things bother them, sometimes bother them too much, to where they get kind of hung up in anxious inside. Especially when they even think about doing something less than savory. So I have this series, Neurosis versus Character Disturbance, criteria 1 through 12, on how neurotic individuals differ from disturbed characters on just about every single dimension of functioning you can imagine. These folks are different. And in my book, Character Disturbance, and in Sheep's Clothing also, I go into detail about these differences. But by definition, folks with impaired characters have a whole lot of trouble with remorse because their conscience is deficient by definition. They might have regret for their actions, especially regret for the practical consequences of their actions. I'll take a case in point here. And this is a perfect point. And people will ask me, how can you make this judgment? Well, in just a moment, I will illustrate for you how easy it is to make these judgments. You know, good neurotics are very hesitant to make judgments. They take very literally and very seriously that admonition in the Gospels to judge not, yet lest ye be judged. So, heeding that advice, they're very hesitant to make judgments about folks. But in our character-disturbed age, folks, you have to make judgments about folks. You just need to make sure that your eyesight is clear and that your perspective is correct so that you can make the correct judgments. But in our character-impaired age, you have to make judgments about people. You can't take anything for granted. But I'll give you an example of the difference between regret and remorse. A while back, a gentleman by the name of Ray Rice was caught on the camera of an elevator, a security camera on an elevator at a hotel, punching the lights out of his then fiancée, a woman who actually married him after the fact. Talk about using judgment. Oh my. Anyhow, he knocks this woman out cold. Now, when he's found out, he definitely has some regret because there are certain consequences. Now, how do I know that remorse was lacking? Well, because anybody who saw the tape knows what also has happened afterward. And that is, afterward, let's say that this was an act of impulse, a pure impulse, uncontrolled, that a person sincerely had remorse for, not just regret over, not just sincerely regretted, but had remorse about. You would expect certain kind of behavior. I'll tell you what you wouldn't expect, as the videotape showed. You wouldn't see someone who very nonchalantly and without any wailing or the gnashing of teeth, or not what did I do, not call a doctor, call 911, get some help, none of that, but drags this lifeless, unconscious body, drags it on the floor with no regard for welfare. That's how you know there's no remorse. That's how you know. Actions speak much louder than words. Now, when all the facts came to light, and when a big brouhaha ensued over the whole affair, perhaps there were some twinges of conscience that got going there, but I doubt it. And I've talked before about how certain personalities, especially the aggressive personality types, have trouble forming any kinds of consciences. And so without conscience, you don't get remorse. You don't get guilt. And, I've known, unfortunately, this is particularly common among batterers and emotional and physical abusers. This is a particularly common pattern. They will have regret each and every time. But remorse? Most of the time, not. And even when they do have some guilt and some remorse, it's not enough. And I'm going to get into that later. I'm going to tell you why it's not enough. And I'm going to tell you why the mental health professions have really done everyone a disservice with the biased research that's been going on. Anybody that wants to tell you that there's not bias and inaccuracy and political correctness in the behavioral sciences research realm, anybody that tells you that that isn't the case is lying through their teeth. Unlike other sciences, especially certain physical sciences where there's still a fair degree of integrity going on with respect to the research done. Unfortunately, I have to say, within the behavioral sciences, there are so many biases and so many political correct considerations. It's not funny. It really, truly isn't funny, because we come up with all kinds of stuff that we tell people many times that disadvantages them. And I'm going to speak to that very, very specifically in just a moment when I talk about one of the issues that's on the current blog post this week when we talk about shame. I'll get to that in just a minute. But disturbed characters, especially those who are prone to abuse and exploitation and those are prone to battering types of behavior, they'll have regret, all right, but they rarely have remorse. And a great researcher, well, two great researchers, Samenow and Yockelson, they wrote the landmark book, The Criminal Personality, and then Stanton Samenow wrote Inside the Criminal Mind, an excellent read, by the way. If you want to understand not just criminals, but most of the unsavory characters out there, some of whom have not committed crimes but are of like mind, shall we say, this is a great read. But one of his great discoveries was that of all of the cognitive distortions or thinking errors, of all the distorted ways of thinking about things and thinking about life that he'd encountered, one of the things that stood out the most to him was the fact that even folks who had repeatedly trampled the rights and needs of others, repeatedly broke the major rules of society, repeatedly were at odds with the authority figures in their lives, and repeatedly did things to harm people, these folks managed to convince themselves and did their best to convince others that they were, quote unquote, still a good person, end quote, even though they had done horrendous things. And this is a really big cognitive distortion. And it points to the issue of shame. It points to the issue of shame. Guilt and shame are two different concepts. Guilt has to do with feeling bad about something you've done. Shame has to do with feeling bad about who you are as a person. Now, the popular wisdom in psychology for about 25 years now has been that guilt is not only a good thing and helpful, especially in the right doses, but is essential to good character formation. That those of us who cannot experience guilt are truly character impaired. And for us to function adaptively in a social network, within a social atmosphere, we have to have at least the capacity to experience guilt. We have to feel badly about doing wrong to someone else, injuring someone else, trampling their rights, abusing them in some way, exploiting them in some way. So that's what guilt is all about. But the literature has been very, very clear about saying that shame, feeling bad about who you are, is never a good idea. Is never a good idea. And can be toxic. There were many self-help books in the 70s and 80s on toxic shame. I remember them well. Matter of fact, there was a new one out just about every 3 or 4 months. Toxic Shame was the title of 2 of them. I'm here to tell you that it wouldn't matter how many hundreds of research designs, how many experimental enterprises were carried out, how many experiments were conducted on the topics of shame and guilt to prove that guilt is okay but shame is bad, that they did. I would still insist that it is wrong to think, it is absolutely dead wrong to think that all shame is bad or toxic. I do agree that shame can be toxic. It can be. But it does not have to be. As a matter of fact, it can be powerfully constructive. If I were to pick one word that aptly describes some of the behavior, some of the more egregious behavior that you have seen congressmen caught doing the most horrendous things, sexting and saying lurid things and having trysts here and there and doing other unfortunate things and financial irregularities and whatnot, getting caught, being disgraced, having to leave office, and then without turning anything around, picking themselves back up and daring to run again. We've had 3 examples of this in just the last 2 years alone that made headlines. Anthony Weiner, number 1. And if there was one word that would capture what it is about these folks that allows them to do this kind of thing, that allows them to stand right back up with pride, knowing that they are still the same despicable character that they were when they got found out, because they're still doing some of the same nasty things. If there's one thing that would enable them to do that, the word would be shameless. They are without shame. And that is bad. That is bad. They knew they were guilty. Guilt didn't stop them. Remorse didn't stop them. I've known hundreds, really perhaps in the small numbers of thousands, of the worst criminals and most severely impaired characters you'd ever want to meet. And I can tell you this: guilt never saved a one of them. Of the few, and I've met a few, that managed to turn their lives around and become decent folks and contributing members of society, only one thing saved them, and that was shame. As soon as they could no longer live with themselves and who they were as a person, things changed. Shame saved them where guilt did not, where remorse did not. Shame saved them. As soon as they could no longer look in the mirror and be happy with what they saw, not just the behaviors, but the person. What am I like as a person? What are my qualities? What are my attributes? What defines my personality? Am I slick? Am I manipulative? Am I calculating? Am I too aggressive? Am I too covert in my ways? What defines me as a person? And do I like that image? Is that who I want to be? Can I look myself in the eye in the mirror and say that I am at peace with who I see? That and that alone saved the disturbed characters that turned their lives around. Shame. Shame did that. So I say to all of you biased, politically influenced researchers out there, I say to you, shame on you. Because I do believe that most know firsthand the value of shame. Now, I'm not inviting anybody to heap on toxic levels of denigration on people and their character. We do not want to crush people's spirits. But not all shame is bad, and shame can be constructive. And a few brave researchers have finally begun to realize that. There's actually been a couple of studies in the last 5 years that bear out what I'm saying, and there needs to be more. And I suspect there will be more. Because in our politically influenced, biased times, the pendulum unfortunately swings back and forth with the politically correct winds of the time. So I do think that there will be more studies that will validate this. And I know that several of you have had this experience. I know that several of you have dealt with folks in your life, and you've asked yourself the question, have they no shame? And you think that they must. But the answer to the question is, no, they don't, or they wouldn't keep acting the way they do. Perhaps you have an example of that. Maybe you want to share it with us at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'd be happy to take your call if you've got one of those examples and want to share it. So I've written this series of articles, and I spent a lot of time on shame, but I've talked in this second in the series article on misused and misunderstood terms and concepts. I've talked about shame more than I have about guilt and regret and remorse. I haven't yet talked about contrition, and I want to talk about that just a little bit more, because that's another thing that's really misunderstood. And it's such an essential thing when you're dealing with character-impaired people and trying to get folks the help that they need to repair a troubled relationship. If you're in a relationship with a character-impaired person, contrition is absolutely essential. The person has to be able to have a contrite heart. And the word comes from another Latin word. It literally means crushed. Contritus means crushed in Latin. And how the word was derived, it refers to how crushed in spirit a person of some conscience feels when they finally come to reckon with the damage that they've caused as a result of their immoral behavior. They feel a crushing of spirit because they want to be a decent person, and they have been a louse. They've allowed themselves to be a louse. And now their spirit is crushed. And the only way they know to rebuild that spirit, the only way that they can get out from the weight of their own moral deficiency is to do better and to be better. And that's going to take some work. Now, I see this all the time in problem relationships. All the time. The character-impaired person will apologize all over the place. But I'll tell you what contrition sounds like and what it doesn't sound like. It doesn't sound like this. Contrition does not sound like, okay, I've said I'm sorry 1,000 times now. What more do you want from me? That is not what contrition sounds like. Contrition sounds more like, I know I've damaged your trust. I know I've wounded you. I know this is going to be difficult to repair. I don't blame you for being angry. That's what it sounds like. I'm going to take this call. Hello, welcome to Character Matters. Hello. Welcome to Character Matters. Well, we had a dropped call. We had a call and it dropped. Maybe they'll call back. Maybe they will not. Once again, the number to call is 718-717-8296. As I mentioned, contrition sounds more like, I'm ready to work to repair the damage that I've done. I know I've hurt you. I know I've made a mess of things. What do I need to do to make it better? That's what contrition is all about. It's the willingness to do the repair work. It's the willingness to make continuous, sustained efforts, not just to do better, but to be better. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And it's absolutely vital if a relationship was going to be repaired. I'll have more to say on that topic. I'll have more to say about it and on a future program, and I have plenty to say about it in this current series of articles on the blog. So I invite you to visit the blog at manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. And check out the series on commonly misunderstood psychological terms, principles, and concepts. And you'll find the article on shame, guilt, remorse, regret, and contrition as the article posted this past Friday on the blog. It's the second in the series. And right now I want to take just a little bit of time to once again mention, we're going to try and merge this call one more time. Hello and welcome to Character Matters.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I just tried to call earlier and I was having some issues.
I'm glad you got through.
Yeah, how much time do we have?
we have about 5 minutes.
Okay. I know just the things that you were saying on your blog post recently, and then just tonight really resonated with me. Just something I went through a few years ago with somebody who I considered a friend, and it just didn't work out very well, and he wronged me and basically didn't want to own up to it, and basically started telling all of our mutual friends that, that it was my fault and that I didn't want to work it out with him anymore. And This is part of a Christian group, and of course everybody bought into his side of the story without even asking me. And he did this thing where we were on ministry team where he completely pulled out and acted like, because I confronted him on this, and just said things like, I'm really concerned about the health of the team. It's best that I do this because it's going to hinder my service, and everybody just ate that right up. And come to find out, I found out people were talking about why we were no longer friends and that I was responsible for it, and that I refused to meet up with him to try to reconcile and make it work. Really, I was just feeling lied to and manipulated and didn't want anything to do with it. So.
Well, you've brought up a point that I didn't mention earlier, so I'm glad you did, but that is this whole idea of impression management. And it looks like it's rooted in shame, but it's not. Being embarrassed at being found out for the disturbed character that you really are is not the same as being ashamed of yourself. Mm-hmm. Not at all. You can be pretty shameless and still be embarrassed at having been found out. So I'm glad you helped me make this point. I meant to make it earlier and I forgot. So thank you very much.
No problem.
And folks who do have that mask pulled off and are exposed for their true selves, they will do this impression management routine whereby they go out there and try and repair the damage that's done to their image. They don't try to repair the damage they did to you.
Exactly, and I didn't think that would be so hard to do because I thought if we were truly friends, we could have easily moved past this, but it just showed his real colors.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I'm glad that the series is resonating with you. I hope you find information in the books and in the blog articles that helps you sift through this maze of character disturbance and empowers you in your life. I wish we had more time, but I want to recommend something to the listeners. I want to recommend that they go to YouTube and check out one of the videos for the theme song that plays on this program, America My Home, with next week being Veterans Day on Tuesday, sometimes celebrated on Monday. I want folks to check out the videos, download the song, order the music, sing it at one of the events. It's a personal song about restoring the integrity of America by restoring our individual character and living up to this country's best ideals. So I want folks to go and check out the videos. There are 5 videos available on YouTube featuring the song. There's also an America My Home Facebook page. You can Google either me, George Simon. You can Google America My Home. You can Google Anthem for the Millennium. You can go to YouTube search and search patriotic songs and anthems, new patriotic songs and anthems, and you'll come up with it probably on the first page of the search results. And I wouldn't be any happier if more folks wrote to tell me that they were inspired by it, the message themselves to someone else. And I thank you very much for calling in tonight. Did you have another question that you wanted to ask or something you wanted to share?
No, I should have tried to call sooner so we could have discussed it more, but I appreciate you taking my call.
Well, I'd be happy to take a call anytime.
That's a whole different thing.
Tune in again next week for another edition of Character Matters.